MC05, Trimester 1, 2024. This reading is for week 1, and it is called Theories of Development. Heading: Definitions. Growth refers to quantitative changes made by individuals as they age. During childhood, they get bigger, their muscles grow stronger, and so on. Development. In general, the concept of development refers to qualitative changes in individuals' skills. They acquire new capacities that transform how they interact with and respond to the world. Throughout the lifespan, there are both continuities and changes in individuals' functioning over time. This makes predicting outcomes from childhood patterns both fascinating and precarious. For instance, some people with traumatic childhoods become well-adjusted adults, whereas some children who are well-adjusted as youngsters might not necessarily be so in adulthood. Heading: An historical perspective on lifespan. From our vantage point in history, it seems strange that the concept of childhood, as a separate and vulnerable developmental stage, did not emerge until the late 1800s. In literature, the likes of Charles Dickens pointed to the impact of early life experiences on the young characters in his stories. This was a new concept at the time. Prior to that, children were considered to be miniature adults and were held accountable for their actions to the same extent as were adults. Peterson, 2014. The concept of adolescence originated in the last 2 decades of the 19th century, but its modern recognition originated in the US less than 100 years ago. Peterson, 2014. Adolescence and its manifestations are probably an artifact of the imposed, prolonged economic dependence of this group of young people. At an age when in less complex times they would have the capacities to adopt an independent lifestyle. Heading: Theories of Development. Throughout the 20th century, many theories of human development emerged, focusing variously on the stages of cognitive, emotional development, or moral development. Instead of describing what children achieve in these developmental domains, other theories describe how these achievements occur. Heading: Developmental Theory. Developmental theory is based on the view that individuals' development is determined by biological maturation. It is characterized by lists of developmental milestones or achievements and the typical ages at which children achieve these, such as the ages and stages questionnaires and associated learning activities. Twombly and Fink, 2013. Twombly and Fink? That is 100% two people from the Harry Potter world, I swear. Twombly and Fink, yes. I could really picture a shop in like Diagon Alley named Twombly and Fink, and they sell something really interesting. The earlier periods are more defined in terms of their content and timelines than the later ones. In fact, by the age of 6 or 7 years, all the skills of adults are in place, and thereafter just get refined. Therefore, charts of developmental milestones stop at this age. Changes from then on are purely qualitative. The developmental model holds that, Cole Chan, 1990, page 6, here's a quote, biological growth factors control the cognitive and social development of children and adolescents, and that nearly all pass through defined developmental stages as they progress towards maturity. It is accepted that environmental factors influence growth, but to a lesser degree than that demonstrated by biological factors. The biological model implies that individuals will not acquire skills until they are developmentally ready to do so. That is, until they have acquired the previous milestone in the developmental sequence. Miranda and Donnellan, 1987, pages 211 to 212. Note that this model is based on 5 key principles. 1. There is a relatively fixed sequence to development. 2. The acquisition of new skills is irreversible, except in the case of trauma. 3. Earlier steps in the sequence prepare for and provide the basis for later steps. 4. The sequence is always in the direction of simple to complex and concrete to abstract. 5. Earlier stages are never entirely displaced by later stages. It might help to think of development as adding new layers to an onion. The original core remains, but the outer layers add sophistication and complexity to the capabilities of the individual. The sequence of child development follows three principles. Gething and Olds, 1995. 1. Top to bottom development. Cephalocaudal principle. With the head developing in utero before the trunk, and babies being able to hold up their head before they can control their trunk, say to roll over. 2. Inner to outer development. The proximodistal law. Development proceeds from the center of the body outwards, with shoulder and joint control preceding hand control, for example. Simple to complex development. Skills are expressed in a simple form and become more sophisticated with development. Heading: Criticisms of developmental theory. Developmental theory has been criticized for being too individualistic, and that it does not take account of the opportunities to learn that are provided by children's environment. The criticism is misplaced, however. All development occurs within a social and cultural context, which means that the skills that children learn will differ across cultures. However, brain maturation occurs in the same way everywhere. At birth, the cerebellum, which is responsible for motor control, is still developing. Brain circuits are being built and other unused ones pruned to make the brain more efficient. The myelin coating on nerve cells is being laid down to make signal transmission quicker, and the blood-brain barrier is enhancing its integrity. All this is universal. A second criticism of developmental theory is that it often describes what children cannot do rather than what they can. This can set a ceiling on our expectations for children, with the result that we fail to offer them opportunities to grapple with meaningful content on the grounds that it seems too advanced for their age. Unless we provide challenge, we will never discover that our children could achieve more than expected. In answer to this criticism, developmentalists say that the theory was never meant to be prescriptive, only descriptive. That is, the theory recommends that children be given activities that are open-ended, so the children can engage with them in different ways according to their interests and capabilities. Goldstein, 2007. Headings: Advantages of developmental theory. An understanding of child development allows us to have realistic expectations of people of various ages, informs how we can respond to them to meet their needs at different ages, and helps us recognize when children are developing earlier within expectations or atypically. Hoffnung et al. 2016. In turn, this last will allow us to adjust how we teach and respond to these children to meet their atypical needs. In terms of our expectations for children's behavior, understanding what children cannot do can be a kindness. It allows us to understand that 1-year-olds, being equipped with no other natural weapons, often do bite when they feel overwhelmed. 2-year-olds have meltdowns when thwarted because it is difficult for them to change their minds. 3-year-olds cannot be expected to sit passively in restaurants because their concentration span is too limited, and so on. When we don't understand these things, we chastise and punish children for behaviors they cannot help. Developmental theory also spares parents unnecessary worries, such as that their 2-year-old is not yet toilet trained, when this is not normal at that age, or that the 3-year-old child won't sit at the dinner table to eat a family meal, where it is very common for children of this age to graze or eat continuously, rather than to sit down for defined meal times. In other words, as well as absolving children of culpability for behaving childishly, developmental theory spares parents unnecessary worry. Freudian psychosexual theory. Freud's psychoanalytic theory was the first to propose that human actions are driven by our own needs, rather than being determined by outside forces. To him, the key inner drives were sex and aggression, often deeply repressed out of shame. Peterson, 2014. The theory persists because it is vague and largely untestable. If you declare that you are not primarily driven by the sex or aggravation, psychoanalysts can reply that this just shows how deeply repressed you are. Given its lack of an evidential base, Freudian theory is no longer part of mainstream developmental theory. Burke, 2003. Humanist theory. Like Freudians, humanists believe that all of our motivation comes from within, but humanists believe that we are all driven to meet a range of needs in service of becoming the best version of ourselves. These models are typically hierarchical, which means that we cannot attend to the higher order needs unless the lower ones are satisfied. For example, in a war zone, we'll be focused on the lower order need for survival, rather than worrying about the higher order need for self-esteem. According to humanism, personality growth is stunted when individuals are persistently deprived of their lower order needs. Erikson's psychosocial theory. As a Freudian, although he fell out with Freud and departed from his teaching, Erik Erikson believed that human development unfolded as a result of the resolution of a series of inner conflicts, not just two core drives. These conflicts are summarized in box 1.1. From birth to 1 year, the conflict is trust versus mistrust, and the functional outcome is hope without blind faith. From age 1 to 3 years, the conflict is autonomy versus shame and doubt. The functional outcome is the ability to exercise free choice within social constraints. From 3 to 6 years, the conflict is initiative versus guilt. The functional outcome is the courage to pursue worthwhile goals as determined by a mature conscience while not paralyzed by guilt or fear of punishment. From 6 to 11 years, the conflict is industry versus inferiority. The functional outcome is that exercising one's own competencies in cooperation with others. 12 to 18 years, the conflict is identity versus role confusion. Functional outcome, a coherent sense of self that incorporates the past and sets a new direction for future growth. In the early adulthood, intimacy versus isolation is the conflict. The functional outcome is maintaining a sense of self while being able to commit to intimate relationships. For middle adulthood, conflict is generativity versus self-absorption. The functional outcome is the recognition of the finite limits of one's endeavors, while still striving for the good of future generations. And lastly, at old age, the conflict is integrity versus despair. Functional outcome, acceptance of imminent death and willingness to transfer one's strength to the upcoming generations. Cognitive theory. The term cognition means thinking, sensing, and perceiving. Whereas behaviorists say that learning comes about because of external consequences, Piaget and other cognitive theorists say that learning comes about when we change our thinking processes. Now this next sentence I believe is incorrect, but I'll read it word for word. Early in the 20th century, Jean Piaget proposed that are involved in development. It says see box 1.2. And that lists similar sort of thing as Erikson's, certain date range, and then certain things that happen, which I'll go through later. No, I'll go through now. Let's read it now. So, Piaget's stages of development have a sensory motor stage, which is birth to 2 years. Birth to 1 month is the use of reflexes. 1 to 4 months is primarily circular reactions in which infants repeat similar motor movements. 4 to 8 months is secondary circular reactions in which infants repeat interesting movements. 8 to 12 months, coordination of secondary circular reactions involving intentional action sequences and anticipation of events. 12 to 18 months, tertiary circular reactions, characterized by exploration of objects by acting on them in novel ways, imitation of unfamiliar behaviors. 18 months to 2 years, mental combinations. Toddlers can now solve problems by mental representation rather than only through acting on them. Then we have the pre-operational stage, 2 to 7 years. Rapid development of representational skills based on the use of language. Imaginary play emerges as a result of the ability to engage in representational thinking. Egocentrism, in which children are not aware of perspectives other than their own. Transductive reasoning, in which children reason by linking unconnected facts and are swayed more by how things look than by logic. From 7 to 11 years, we have concrete operational stage. Thinking is now more logical and sequential, although still applied to tangible concrete information. There is improved understanding of spatial concepts. Children in this stage can classify problems and objects. As a result, they are more capable at solving problems. Then the formal operational stage, which is 11 plus years. This stage signal the capacity for abstract thinking. Hypothetico-deductive reasoning emerges, in which individuals start from a general theory of all possible factors that might affect the outcome and deduce from it specific hypotheses or predictions about what might happen. Burke, 1997, page 241. They then test these hypotheses. They can also evaluate the logic of propositions without needing to check their conclusions in the real world. Getting back to Piaget. He said that learning comes about when we confront something that differs from past experience. In that case, we have to assimilate the new information into our current theory about how the world works, or if that fails, we will adjust or refine our theory to make sense of the new information. Piaget called this second process accommodation. Burke, 2003. Fastest learning occurs when individuals are engaging in high rates of accommodation. Piaget described 4 stages of development, with each characterized by a specific style of thinking, regardless of the domain in which it was applied. The developmental domain comprised gross and fine motor skills, language skills, cognitive skills, and social skills and emotional skills. Burke, 2003, questions the accuracy of some of Piaget's observations. First, he based his theory on his observations of his own 3 children, which is too small a sample size. Second, the increased precociousness of children over the past century, with IQ going up 3 points per decade, means that Piaget has probably underestimated the cognitive skills of today's young children. Third, the way his questions were asked might have led to some of his observations. For example, to test conservation of matter, he would pour water from a tall glass into a short tumbler, then ask children if there was still the same amount of water. Most would answer that there was less in the short glass. However, young children tend to think that adults know everything and that the question must signal that there has been a change in the amount of water, even though the child doesn't think there has been. When the questioner asks instead if the amount of water has changed or not, many children can accurately answer that it has not. Another issue is that Piaget's tasks were very complex and often unfamiliar to children. When later researchers broke the task down into smaller steps, it turned out that many children did not make the errors in logic that Piaget observed. Finally, the fact that advanced reasoning is present, albeit not entirely accurate, in young children suggests that there is not an abrupt change from one stage to the next, as Piaget suggested, but that there is a continuity to development. Burke, 2003. Kohlberg's theory of moral development. Kohlberg, 1963, in Peterson, 2014, undertook a 20-year longitudinal study of moral reasoning during adolescence. He presented 58 boys, aged 10, 13, and 16, with a set of dilemmas involving a conflict between humanistic needs and legal correctness, such as the dilemma of whether a man who could not afford life-saving medications for his wife should steal them. Kohlberg found that the young people's reasoning changed qualitatively as they grew older, following a fixed sequence and not reverting to earlier types of reasoning. Peterson, 2014. The arguments at each stage built on and expanded the reasoning of earlier stages. The stages are reproduced in box 1.3. Box 1.3 has 5 stages. What is right, why do right, and basic philosophy. Level 1, pre-moral. Stage 1, heteronomous morality. Obey the laws because they are there. Why do right? You will get caught if you don't do the right thing. Basic philosophy. Cannot equate multiple points of view, cannot separate the abstract from the concrete. Level 1, pre-moral. Stage 2, instrumental hedonism. Follow rules if you stand to gain by doing so. Allow and expect others to do the same. Keep bargains with others so that they will keep them with you. Why do right? To serve your own interests. You have to abide by systems that help everyone gain the most. The basic philosophy. No abstract moral values override an enlightened self-interest. Level 2, conventional. Stage 3, conformity. Show concern for others. Live up to other people's rules, even if they don't help you directly. Why do right? You must behave well so that you fit the stereotype of a good person, in your own eyes and in the judgment of others. Basic philosophy. Concrete awareness of the golden rule of doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. Stage 2, conventional. Stage 4, law and order. Abide by the rule rather than being guided by your own or others' needs. Why do right? You must obey all laws so that the system is maintained. Basic philosophy distinguishes between the social and individual good, but cannot envision just laws. Level 3, principled. Stage 5, principled morality. Follow universal laws regardless of majority opinion. Why do right? Serve the welfare of all people, the greatest good for the greatest number. Basic philosophy strives to go beyond rules to resolve tension between what is right, which is legal, and what is correct, ethical. Kohlberg found that the first 3 stages occupied most of adolescence, with very few of his subjects attaining levels 4 or 5 while still in their teens, and 3/4 of them still using conventional moral arguments, characteristic of stage 4 and below, at the age of 32, Peterson 2014. That is, the majority of these well-educated, middle-class young men continued to reason at a less than fully mature level, Peterson 2014. There are some limitations to Kohlberg's theory, Peterson 2014. It tells us nothing about how his young subjects would actually act in a moral dilemma. The study was of hypothetical moral dilemmas, although his stages do tend to be associated with how people really do act when faced with ethical crises in their own lives. We have no information about whether the stages are universal across cultures and genders, or apply only to North American males. The theory may misrepresent the process of moral reasoning in women. Early studies show that women tend to rise to stage 3 only, whereas men rise to stage 4 level of moral reasoning. However, more recent studies do not find a distinctive style for women versus men, suggesting that Kohlberg's male-dominated scenarios bias the original findings. Peterson, 2014. Heading: How development occurs. The above theories differ in their beliefs about what skills unfold as children mature. Theories also abound about how this maturation occurs, whether it is the result of the maturation of the individual from inner forces or from the influence of external events. The first chapter of your textbook highlights 3 aspects of this debate. 1. Nature versus nurture, or how much we are determined by our genetic heritage compared to the environment in which we live. 2. Discontinuity versus continuity, or what changes happen suddenly, such as those wrought by puberty, and what changes are more an ongoing progression. And 3. Universal versus context-specific changes. What aspects of development are universal, in which we all follow the same path, such as puberty, and which are specific to their context, such as the time at which an individual might marry? Genetics, nature. Much of the research into the influence of genetics on development is based on twin studies. Identical twins have the same genetic code. If a pair of identical twins has been raised independently after being adopted out early, the similarities are likely genetically determined, while the differences are due to upbringing. Although not surprisingly, it is never quite that neat in reality. Not least because children shape the environment that is around them. For example, bright children read and think more, thereby contributing to their own enrichment. Plowman and Price, 2003. Another great Harry Potter Diagon Alley name. Even though individuals' genetic endowment places a ceiling on their developmental potential, how close the development ultimately comes to reaching that ceiling is determined by the quality of their environment. Environmental theory, nurture. Environmental theories uphold that the explosion in brain development described earlier is intimately reliant on the quality of stimulation that babies, infants, and young children receive from their environment. Cole and Chan, 1990. A gardening analogy can help here. Although a plant has its biological growth patterns determined genetically, those patterns will not unfold unless the plant is raised in conducive soil conditions, the environment, and with good nurturing, food and water. The environmental model is based on 2 fundamental premises. first, that there is no one set of conditions that will promote optimal development. The specific factors that best facilitate learning may differ at various stages of children's development. That is, the environmental features that are ideal at one age might not be the same ones that are required at another age. Development is dynamic, which is to say that an individual's needs change through their lifetime, and therefore, in order to remain facilitating, the environment needs to alter in response to the individual's changing needs. Horowitz, 1987. This accounts for children whose early promise is not realized, which Horowitz puts down to the environment becoming less optimal over time, and for individuals who are late bloomers, resulting from an improved match between the environment's quality and the children's needs and abilities. Similarly, environmental features that facilitate optimal development in one domain might not be the same ones that promote optimal development in other domains. Horowitz, 1987. Horowitz gives the examples of a parent who promotes early language development but does not equally foster spatial skills, or a child with musical talents might not be given a violin, and therefore those talents do not get actualized. Second, the environment needs to provide optimal rather than perfect conditions, which implies that one can have too much of a good thing. For example, although group acceptance is usually considered necessary for optimal personal growth, feeling out of step with others or with the current state of knowledge are necessary catalysts to a person's search for a creative solution. Sternberg and Lubart, 1991. This conclusion is refined by Horowitz, 1987, who poses a model that describes that children's physical, intellectual, and emotional characteristics render them either invulnerable, resilient, or vulnerable to the quality of the stimulation that is provided by their family, social, cultural, and institutional environments. When these environments facilitate optimal development, both types of children will prosper. When, however, these environments are not conducive to optimal development, resilient children will still prosper, while vulnerable children will not. The goodness of fit between the environment and heredity. Is heredity a word? Hereditariness. The goodness of fit between the environment and heredity may not just be due to the dynamics of the environment, however, but also to the dynamic nature of genetic expression. We may have structural genes that determine our physiological and behavioral traits, and regulatory genes that determine when structural genes will show their effects. McLean, 1970, and Peterson, 2014. Meanwhile, although genetics shape children's makeup, children themselves also shape their environments. Peterson, 2014, report that parents' parenting style responds to the children's personal style. With different personalities, each child in the family engineers an environment for him or herself that is different from the environment of siblings. This has been explained in terms of environmental engineering, which means that infants interact with their environment in ways that suit their personality. Contemporary thinking concludes that it is likely that genetic makeup interacts with the environment to produce not an either-or influence on the person's eventual capacities, but an interactive effect whereby the environment alters the expression of the person's genetic makeup, and the genetic makeup alters how the environment is shaped around the person. Clark, 2002, Plumman, 1997, Renzulli, 1986, Sattler and Dumont, 2004. It could be expected that the environment would have increasing influence throughout life, but the opposite is the case. This is verified by the fact that unrelated, e.g. adopted siblings, growing up in the same family have similar IQs during early childhood, but by late adolescence resemble each other no more than if they were strangers. This is because young children are not in command of their environments, but these are shaped by the adults in the family, with the result that siblings have similar experiences. However, by late adolescence, the siblings can actively select, modify, and even create environments that encourage the development of their genetic proclivities. The result is that, by this later age, their performance levels come to reflect their genetic endowment. Bronfenbrenner's sociocultural theory. Yuri Bronfenbrenner created a framework for thinking about the multiple influences on children's development, as pictured in Figure 1.2. Figure 1.2 is a bunch of concentric circles, The innermost circle has child, the next circle out around that has microsystem, with things like family, health services, church groups, school, peers, neighborhood play area, and daycare. Then you've got the mesosystem that is outside that. The exosystem, which is the extended family outside that, so friends of family, neighbors, legal services, mass media, social welfare services. And outside of that, we've got the macro system, which is the attitudes and ideologies of the culture. Getting back to Yuri Bronfenbrenner, he saw children as developing within 4 interacting systems. Hoffnung et al., 2016, page 10. The microsystem. Influential people with whom the child has face-to-face contact. The mesosystem. Relationships between microsystems, such as between home and school, the workplace and the family. The exosystem. These are settings where a person does not participate, but nevertheless is affected indirectly by the actions and decisions made there, such as the local council. The macrosystem comprises overarching institutions that govern the behavior of society as a whole, such as its governments and laws. Bronfenbrenner believed that the environment is always changing or in flux, with family changes such as the birth of a new sibling or a parental divorce in turn affecting child development. Hoffnung et al., 2016. He also believed that children are both the product of and producer of their environments, shaping through their own actions how parents respond to them. Vygotsky's socio-cultural theory. Like Jean Piaget, Lev Vygotsky believed that children are self-motivated explorers who aim to understand their world. However, Vygotsky did not believe that children were solitary agents, but instead developed understandings through social exchanges, that is, by interacting with others. Burke, 2003. These interactions shape the way children think and interpret the world, with language being the major means by which social experience is represented in children's minds. Burke, 2003. In other words, the mind is socially formed. Vygotsky believed that children develop new knowledge and skills when supported by more skillful companions to achieve a task that they would not yet be able to do alone. With the appropriate support, they can take the next step. He called this the zone of proximal development. That is, where teaching is at a manageable level for the child because it's proximal, close, to what the child can already achieve. Vygotsky thus emphasizes assisted discovery, in contrast to Piaget's independent discovery. This teaching model is termed scaffolding, changing support as the child becomes more competent through task completion, or guided participation. Vygotsky's theory tells us that when children are reared in different social environments, their development will differ. Burke, 2003. This is in contrast with Piaget, who believed that child development was universal because it came solely with biological maturation. Burke, 2003. Behavioral theory. In an answer to Freudian theory, which said that our actions are governed by subconscious drives, behaviorism argued that our actions are all controlled by external consequences, rewards, or punishments. It considers concepts such as the subconscious or the mind to be useless, because they cannot be observed, measured, or verified. Instead, this theory believes that we learn everything from watching others and from being reinforced, or rewarded, when we perform the same behavior. Meanwhile, we drop other behaviors from our repertoire because we are punished for performing them, or we see others being punished for them. Unlike developmentalists who await the unfolding development of individuals, behaviorists believe that they can manipulate the developmental sequence by rewarding individuals for performing behaviors that would be out of sequence given their age. They have not had much luck with this project. That's in brackets. This theory does not explain how we learn about things that we have not experienced directly, how we form the connections between words and symbols that are necessary for learning language, how we arrive at beliefs, how we produce novel behavior such as uttering a sentence that no one has ever spoken before, and it does not account for the qualitative changes in learning that occur through the lifespan. Heading: The Biopsychosocial Framework. Your reading for this week from Kale and Kavanagh, 2019, page 8, introduces this model, which upholds that development unfolds in response to 4 interacting forces. the biological forces, including genetics and health, the psychological forces, including cognitive and emotional factors that affect development, socio-cultural forces that include social, cultural, and interpersonal influences on development, and life cycle forces that reflect how events differentially affect individuals at various ages. Heading: Research in Human Development. The second section of Chapter 1 of Kale and Kavanagh, 2019, discusses a range of research concepts. Information about research methods is important when considering the quality of evidence that exists for particular theories. Heading: Correlation and Causality. You will note the common tool of correlation, where one thing is linked to another. As you read this section, keep in mind that in life many things are correlated, but that does not prove that one thing causes the other. For example, children's mathematics ability is correlated to their shoe size. Why? It does not mean that their shoe or foot size somehow causes good math skills. Instead, there is a third factor at work here, and that is age. The older children become, the bigger their feet and the better they are at maths, compared to when they were younger. Always look for the third factor. Another example is that children of single parents tend to do, very slightly, less well in school. Sandifer and Wells, 1999. The conclusion of the family values camp is that single-parent families are bad for children. But again, there is a third factor. The clue to what the factor might be is the average income levels of women compared to men. Women earn less than men and are more likely to be thrown into poverty after a marital separation. MacDonald, 1993. The cause is not single parenting, but a third factor, poverty. These examples illustrate that when we read that two things are correlated or linked, it will not necessarily mean that one causes the other. Look for the third factor. Retrospective reasoning. Famously, there was a period in the late 20th century when it was discovered that many men in prison had a genetic defect of two Y chromosomes. Their XY pair was an XYY triplet. This conclusion was that the extra Y chromosome gave them a tendency towards violence. Some prisoners even got out of prison on the basis of this argument. However, researchers quickly tested the population at large and found that a similar proportion of the general population also had an XYY genetic makeup, and yet were not criminal. The theory fell apart. It should never have been mounted, of course, because of the lack of a reference group. Similar errors were made in that era, when it was asserted that using marijuana would lead to hard drug use such as heroin. The researchers drew this conclusion by asking heroin users if they had previously used marijuana. They had, and the researchers concluded that marijuana use led to heroin use. This was ridiculous, of course, because heroin users probably drank coffee too, and no one was claiming that drinking coffee led to heroin use. The problem came about because the research was done backwards. The correct way to do it would have been to have followed marijuana users forward over time. This would have led to this discovery that few marijuana users graduate into hard drugs. A similar mistake was made in the theory of child sexual abuse perpetrators. Researchers asked perpetrators about their childhoods and found that many of them had been abused, and thus was born the theory that child sexual abuse causes victims to become perpetrators later in life. However, when researchers asked the general population, it turns out that 15% were abused in childhood. Kim and Siketti, 2006. But these survivors don't all go on to become abusers in adulthood. Moreover, most victims are female, whereas most perpetrators are male, which means that victimization in childhood, for girls at least, does not cause them to become abusers later in life. Just because one event follows another, it does not mean that they are linked causally. To conclude with another example, when children go into meltdown, parents often give them attention. Therefore, we have assumed that the meltdown is attention-seeking behavior. In saying this, however, we have confused outcome with motive. This is illustrated by the example that when a child falls off her bike and is given a band-aid for her skinned knee, we don't assume that falling off the bike is band-aid seeking behavior. The outcome, a band-aid, did not motivate the child to fall off her bike. Likewise, the outcome of attention does not motivate children to have meltdowns. Porter, 2016a. These errors in logic often become the stuff of urban myths and are sustained despite being debunked in subsequent research. It is important, therefore, that you question how research is conducted. Conclusion. Theories are a way of organizing our ideas into a coherent whole in a way that makes them testable. Hence the quote at the beginning of this week that if you want to get ahead, get a theory. This is because theories help us not only to know what to do, but also to be able to explain our practices. This is the essence of professionalism. Although theories might sound too abstract to be of practical use, they describe why and how things work as they do. Shibakus et al. 2005. They explain and predict events and, in doing so, guide practice. The various developmental theories focused on different psychological processes. Piaget, for example, emphasized cognitive development, whereas Erikson and the humanists emphasize emotional development. It is probably impossible to establish empirically which theory is most true or valid, but it is possible to conclude which ones are most useful, and that in turn will depend on the use to which they are being put. The end. Well done for listening. And I'm going to try and read this word. The cephalocaudal principle. 1. Top to bottom development. The cephalocaudal and the brain-blood barrier is enhancing its integrity. And the blood-brain... And the blood... It's not hard. And the blood-brain... and the blood-brain barrier is enhancing its integrity.